beyond construction. And then in addition, we're involved in a number of other community engagement projects, both engaging communities offline as well as online. And as part of that, I'd like to thank Steve Cliff at eDemocracy, who helped get a lot of you people here because you were on various email lists and listservs and that kind of thing that Steve Cliff and his group runs. We supported them a year ago for a 3-year effort to build out the neighbor forums in all St. Paul neighborhoods, and Steve will say a little bit more about that at the tail end of the meeting. What we're going to do today, really the main thing, is to have John Bracken, my colleague, who also doesn't live in Miami. He actually lives in Chicago. And
Nobody booed in Chicago.
No. Chicago's a good thing. John is actually in Chicago as a result of, because his wife works in Chicago, and so he's managed to convince folks that he could be in Miami as often as they like, as long as he doesn't have to live there all the time. So John's going to talk, do a lot of question and answer, ask you all questions, and then at the tail end of the meeting, we're going to have our other, in addition to Steve from eDemocracy Talk, we're also going to have a colleague of his from Open Twin Cities, and Kit Hadley from the St. Paul Public Libraries, who's also here, and thank you to Kit for helping co-host this and for this great space. For those of you who haven't been here, you should come here often. This is my favorite library. So, and it really was really a very early, really demonstration of the kind of additional development we all would like to have on the Central Corridor that really is pedestrian friendly, is part of the neighborhood, is of the neighborhood. And so I'm thrilled to be here because this actually feels like sort of a harmonic convergence for me. Knights has a big interest in libraries. We have a big interest in St. Paul. We're on the Central Corridor. And I have a colleague here to talk about open government, which has been, and the Open Government News Challenge. And open government has become a bit of a sweet spot for a number of different parts of Knight, both our Journalism and Media Innovation Group, as well as our National Strategic Initiatives Group, and our community group. And so in an effort to not be quite such a silo, we're trying to really take advantage of those the synergies there. So John?
And I have one.
Yeah, sorry, Steve.
Yes,
yeah.
One little historical flip.
Yes.
A quick survey.
The historical context.
Yes. Quick survey. Who found out about this via the City Camp Minnesota email list from 2 years ago? A few of you. How many folks found out about it on eDemocracy, one of the neighborhood forums? A lot. Wow, lots of you. Okay. How about the Immigrant Bridges email network? Anybody from that network? I think that's what, Antonio, that's what got forwarded to you and went to that network. How else did folks find out about today?
Eventbrite.
Eventbrite. Okay. All right. So quick history piece. I used to be government by day and citizen by night. So today I'm the executive director. I was also the founder of eDemocracy, Minnesota eDemocracy back in 1994. But I worked in state government. And I actually helped create North Star, now the then name of the state homepage. And I just want to point something out. Back in 1995, we actually had a democracy button on the homepage. And the reason these look like buttons is back then we were fighting the kiosk people. People wanted to bring proprietary kiosks to Minnesota. So I made the screen look as much like a kiosk as I could to say, look, we can use this new thing called the World Wide Web and be open, right? And we also had a section called North Star Interactive, which is actually a directory of where civil servants could go to interact with each other and interact with public and communities of practice and the like. But I left state government in 1998, and the message was pretty loud and clear. It was services first, democracy later. Services first, democracy later. I'm a democracy guy, and I wrote an article where I concluded that the most democratizing aspect of the internet is for the ability for people to organize and communicate in groups. And this is before Facebook, right? This is a long time before that. And I noticed the Night News Challenge saying, how can citizens and their governments interact? That's the core of the question for the Night News Challenge. So it's very heartening to say, now it is later. Okay, John, take it away.
Welcome to later. Well, thanks. Particularly thanks to Steve and what eDemocracy has been doing. As he was talking, and as I was thinking about the history in this space, we probably wouldn't be doing the news challenge if you hadn't been doing the work you've been doing over the years, Steve. So thanks a lot. I'm just going to say a couple things about what we're up to, and then really just try to just have a conversation and hear from all of you. First, thank you to Kit in the library. One of the things Polly didn't say is the reason I get to live in Chicago is my wife works for Chicago Public Library. We actually live down the block from her library, so it's very much a community experience for us, and through her, I'm learning a lot more about how vital libraries are. I mean, just for doing something like this, right? As we think about trying to push forward new ways that citizens are able to engage with their government and come together with one another to be better participants in their community, libraries as an institution are clearly a key part of that, as we're demonstrating today. So even saying that to you feels silly. And it's a big thing that we're working on at night nationally, is trying to drive forward the libraries as a course spot for us coming together. I asked Polly and Steve on Friday whether there was going to be Wi-Fi at the event, and they're like, of course it's in a library, like that's where we all get out, and so this, open internet access and the ability to communicate with one another is now eponymous with being in a library, so it's appropriate that we're here. So Steve stole a little bit of how we're defining open government, because it means different things to different people, and it's actually kind of can be a really geeky term, and one of the things we're trying to do over the next 2 weeks, if this contest is open, and throughout the rest of the year with other activities we're doing, is expand beyond that term, expand beyond the geeks, many of whom have done amazing things with this term open government, but to broaden it. But for us, it really just means, what are the tools and approaches that enable us as citizens to change our communities? And that's sort of the bedrock of where we are. What enabled us to change the way our polity is organized, the way we engage in a democracy. And so before I go into the details of what we're trying to do, I'll just step back and tell you a little bit about the history of the News Challenge. You can see our site, which is live now, newschallenge.org. Knight, in addition to being vested in the communities, as Polly noted, has a long, deep history in caring about journalism and the ways in which we learn about what's going on around us and become part of a community-based conversation. About 6 or 7 years ago, when the crisis in the news industry came to the fore, Knight sort of had a moment of realizing the projects we're doing to help train journalists of the future, the projects we're doing to help promote journalism of the future could be in doubt. There's such disruption taking place through virtue of the internet and these small little cameras hanging on stands like that one and mobile telephony, that let's step back and let's really try to re-engage with news and information in a new way. The main mechanism we've had to do that is we created this thing called the Knight News Challenge, which was an attempt for us as an institution that was so embedded in journalism and working through a news industry that was in the midst of losing over $4 billion of worth over the last few years. And sort of to jumpstart our thinking, to jumpstart the networks that we're working with, and to identify new areas of exploration. For us, it's meant funding an array of experiments and projects over the last 7 years. I think we've invested probably almost, if not quite, $30 million at this point in several dozen projects. This one is special because it's the first one we're doing a deep dive on a particular topic. And that's not an accident, right? So in the past, we felt like the future was so unclear and so inchoate that putting a focus on a particular issue, we didn't feel a sense of confidence. We wanted people's ideas, new approaches for doing news. I think over the course of the last few years, over the course of last year in particular, we sensed a burgeoning momentum in this field that right now we're calling open government. But again, being broad about it, thinking about the set of initiatives and projects that are trying to take these new tools and approaches and use them as ways to make us better citizens and make our democracy better. So that's what we've done with this project here. We have we're going to be doing 2 news challenges this year, so we're giving away about $5 million, probably more than $5 million total by the end of the year. because we have a themed issue, because we have a timelined contest, right? So it ends 2 weeks from tomorrow or today? Let's see, today, 2 weeks from today, so I should know this. March 28th, March 18th is the last date that the contest is open. It's allowed us to have conversations like this and hear what's happening nationally. I think this is probably, if we add them all up, probably the 14th or 15th event like this that we've done across the country. My colleagues did an event in Miami that had 200 people Saturday. I was in a snowstorm in Chicago and several dozen people came out last week. We've been to places that you wouldn't associate necessarily with open government, like Lexington and Boulder and Macon, and we've gone to places like Boston and New York and San Francisco as well. It's one of the things that's allowed us, and through having conversations like this, is to realize there really is a burgeoning set of conversations and activity and focus on this topic. There's no longer, while there may have been a couple years ago, a sense that we needed to convince our policymakers or our elected leaders that making data and information open and usable by us was an important factor. Increasingly, that conversation is not happening. Increasingly, the people who we've elected, the people who are our policymakers, are realizing in various degrees that this is an important topic and an important movement. So, you know, I've been at events like this much more often with policymakers and government officials and people from civic institutions than I have felt any push about, we need to march on City Hall and tell them to release our data. I feel like that conversation has happened. Now what we're shifting to, and Steve alluded to it, and his work is driving it, is how do we make that data, how do we take these trends and make them more applicable to more people? Right? How do we make them intrinsic to our lives? How do we, you know, the question of the lost cat, right? How do we serve actual real needs and opportunities that people have in their lives? Which frankly, with all the momentum and interesting thing we've seen in this space, the number of real solid victories or products that have changed people's lives across the board are still relatively few. So through this process that we're doing with the News Challenge and other activities, we're really hoping that we can increase that number of projects, of platforms, of ideas that allow us to live our lives better. So we're looking for 3 different things in this, with that backdrop. One is basic meat and potato ideas that will just allow us to live our lives better. Maybe build on activities that you already have going on in your daily work, or that, you know, someone sitting in City Hall dealing with water issues is already thinking about. Right? So for instance, you know, it might be a teacher may have an idea about how she could better engage the parents of her kids with decision-making happening at the school board level. So really sort of pragmatic issues of how do we make small wins, even at a neighborhood level. Second, though, is more broadly, I feel like these tools and approaches that have emerged over the last few years give us an opportunity to even rethink the way we engage with our government and with one another at all. So we're hoping to get these sort of blue sky daydreams about, geez, if we use these tools in this way, it might completely change the way I deal with government. Or I might not even deal with government on this topic, I might just deal with my neighbors. So we don't just want the pragmatic day-to-day, we also want the big crazy ideas. The third thing that's also different about this year, the third thing that we're looking for is trying to bake in real conversation and responses to the ideas that come up. So the platform that we've built, newschallenge.org, is a new platform that we spent much of the last year recrafting, because we really wanted to create a space that enabled people to have exchanges and conversations about ideas. We didn't just want Steve to put up an idea, have it sit there, and then we come in as the big foundation, read through it, and give it thumbs up or thumbs down. So we've done a couple of things. One, we've crafted a platform that, in order to apply, you need to register with the site. And you get an account with the site, and you can register through Facebook. And so you're present as yourself. Thank you. Second, we brought in 8 people from across the country who have experience in varying types of journalism and community engagement and kind of open source civic hacking to help accelerate those conversations and to respond to every application that comes up. And third, we're trying to emphasize, even for people who don't have the idea for the next great thing that's not going to, maybe they're not thinking about trying to win their share of the $5 million, your input and reactions and criticisms and applause is actually a little thing that you can do with one of the ideas. If you like it, you applaud it. We want those responses and those conversations to happen. Again, because we feel like for all the potential in this space, the danger is that it can become kind of an insular, nerdy space. And we think the potential is much greater for the ideas and the impact when people from outside, people who aren't even working on OpenGov right now, come in and contribute their ideas and their reactions. And that's what we're betting on. I should say part of what drives this for me is I was giving a tour to a friend around an office space where there was an OpenGov meeting coming up, and it was listed on the chalkboard. And this friend is, he's very civically engaged. He sits on 2 boards. He's all the demographics you would want for someone who's, he's internet savvy. He's a media maker. He's on Facebook. He didn't know what OpenGov was, and actually it was him and a colleague. And for me, as someone who's been working on this topic with most of my time over the last 6 months, it sort of took me back. Like, he's my age, we do similar things together. He doesn't even know what this topic, which I feel like has such potential for making the world a better place. And so that's driven a lot of what we've been doing, is how do we make sure not just a young professional who's civically engaged, make sure that he's engaged with this, but broaden it so that everyone who has an idea about how to make their community a better place can step up and be part of it. Ultimately, what we want to do is shift so that open government is no longer a movement or kind of a hashtag that geeks talk about, but rather there's an expectation for how our governments work, how we relate to our governments, and ultimately how democracy functions. So I'll just stop there for now. I'm happy to tell you more or go into details or share ideas we're hearing, if you like.
Time for questions.
Yep, totally.
Yep.
Yes, Art.
I keep thinking that starting on
I'm
the
going to sit down and make this look less weird.
for somebody to jump into an e-democracy forum that has 500 or 800 members is not something that your typical low-level digital literacy person is going to do. That is too scary. So I think that you need to go to people where they're at, maybe on a block level, or a family level, or a church organization level, and say, what do you people want to do? What is your mission? And in learning theory, if a person is emotionally involved in doing something they think matters, they're going to pick up the skills they need toward that end. So that's the motivating factor. First you say, what do you want to do? And then you give them an environment, and I'm thinking of like a learning environment online that has a wiki and a blog and a bookmarking, social bookmarking, the typical networking type skills that you want them to learn how to use. You give them that, and you say, well, you can communicate with each other with your forum if you aren't face-to-face. And when you make a decision, maybe you can put that on a wiki, so that's a more permanent thing. And then eventually that community organizes themselves, but the skills they pick up there then can be transferred to a bigger open government type of interaction. So you go on the block level, then maybe a community level. I had an experience at Como Park. I lived in Como Park, but I was not in the Como Park District Council. I was like right next to the meeting for District 10, half a block away, but I was in District 6. And 3 years ago, I says, can you move the boundaries of the district councils so that I can walk a half a block instead of walking 32 blocks to the meeting? And they says, move boundaries for district councils? You gotta be kidding. You know, and I went to the district council 6 and district council 10 and gave them my point, and they said no. And I talked to city council people, and they said, nope, no way, we're moving boundaries. Well, then the neighborhood that wanted to have the boundary changed formed a Facebook page, and they started talking to each other. And they went to a new sympathetic district council member, Amy Brandmullen, and said, you know, we really think the boundaries should be changed. We're Como Park. We should be in Como Park District 10. We want to be there. And she said, well, go to your district councils and make your point. And they said no. So they organized on the Facebook, and they showed up on a mass meeting. They had 200 people show up at the Como Park Pavilion. And it blew District 6 and District 10 away. They says, I guess the people have told us what they wanted. 200 people showed up because they had a social network.
Yeah.
So 1% of the people showed up, and they did something that nobody's ever done before, and that's change district council boundaries in the government.
And that's one of the things that, you know, I didn't mention is one of the things we prioritize are, and I did emphasize tools and approaches, are tools and approaches that can be replicated or borrowed and used elsewhere, right? And someone could have the greatest idea, and they're going to use it in, you know, in whatever, just in St. Paul. If it's not an idea that can be, that others can learn from and build upon, whether it's literally build upon and build upon the code, or build upon intellectually, it's less valuable to us than if it's just going to be.
Oh, you're fine. No, you can sit down.
If it's just going to be a one-off idea that doesn't have value.
Now you don't fit. You stood up.
John has looked at different attempts to get people involved in government up and down, like the crime things, the local crime statistics, or you've looked at games like budget balancing games and tried to pull people into a deeply governmental political situation.
Since you know a little bit about budget balancing games, do you want to?
John, can people say their names
Sure.
and their affiliation with
I'm
these
Michael
things?
Scholar with Public Radio International, and when I was at Minnesota Public Radio, we created the Minnesota Budget Balancer, and then we created Budget Hero for the national. But just as you've looked through this field as part of the foundation and thinking where you want to go, what have you found has led to lasting civic engagement? Because a lot of those were kind of attempts to pull people in on a particular issue. And I'm just curious if what learning you have looking at things like that.
I think a lot of the lasting momentum has come from the people who are actually building these things, right? And so I sort of, the phrase that I've sort of settled on is civic hackers, right? It's sort of these people who are skilled at building things. Often they build things in their own time. Often they work in technology, and that's what they build on. And often they think, and they either are or think like engineers, and they get frustrated by something, and they don't care whether they just don't sleep for the weekend. They stay up all weekend hacking together something. They don't like the public transit site, so they spend all weekend, refixing the public transit site. And there are some organizations like Code for America, which is a national effort to place some of those people side by side with local governments, that have tried to harness that more holistically. But a lot of that still remains sort of inchoate off to the sides. And I think where there are examples of cities, and it's mostly the cities that come to mind are Boston, San Francisco, Chicago, New York, that have figured out how to harness that and kind of build a bridge between what's happening on the city government level and civic institutions, and connecting that with this sort of civic hacker momentum. So that leaves out a lot of people and a lot of projects and a lot of opportunities and a lot of problems. And that's where we feel like, that's where I'm excited that the potential outstrips the reality so far. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Hi.
My name is Harry Adler. I was going to, actually, when you made the comment about the budget balancer, I was a teacher and a principal in a middle school environment, and I was actually fascinated by what the New York Times provided online, and a few of the sites in terms of the budget balancer for the national government. I'm not sure that's what was referring to there.
They stole that from Michael.
Okay.
No, they did. They did.
But from my standpoint, it was a wonderful opportunity to engage students, and to me, where you talk about who to engage, I think you have to, in order to change this sort of paradigm, it has to be young people to a large degree. I mean, there are people who've been activists for a long time, my age and so forth, who are out there to try to do things. But if you can get engaged with middle school kids, high school kids, college students, and so forth, it's a wonderful place. But what I saw as a challenge in terms of using that simulator and so forth was there wasn't as much information there as I'd like. It was like, here's a few choices you can do. If you choose this is what's going to do to the budget. Make this choice. But it was, I think there'd be many teachers or many organizations that would be interested in providing, using data, when data is really widely available, to help engage citizens in making decisions and becoming more informed in how decisions can be made, as opposed to just, sound bites.
One of the things I heard when I was in New York was basically, we need to have a better platform for yelling at our government officials. And then one of the things I heard in Chicago was, we need to have a better platform for taking our government officials out for a beer. Right? And so, I mean, there's different approaches. And then the other one, which is, we'd have a better platform so we can eliminate, or just, the government official can be at the table with us, right? Rather than it be us trying to pipe it up. I mean, so I think all those, there are many routes to get there, right? Yes, please.
My name is Von Larry from Aurora St. Anthony Neighborhood Development Corporation. This area here, you're talking about, about government. We have a big digital divide in this area right here. We don't have a lot of Wi-Fi in the area and all that stuff. So how would you market that to our community?
Yeah, no, that's a huge question that we've been wrestling with. I mean, one of the things we're seeing is a lot of energy around hitting people where they are and getting them engaged with the tools they do have, right? So we're working with a project called Textizen, which grows, actually, the Code for America group I mentioned, a set of their fellows in Philadelphia. We're working with the city government. In the city there, and when I say the city, it's not often, the mayor or this, the chief, whatever. It's often, the fellows for Code for America end up side by side with people actually doing the work for the government. And out of those conversations, the notion of let's create a tool so that citizens, while they're waiting for a bus or walking to the grocery store, even if they're not on the web, even if don't have an iPhone, are able to have a conversation with the city quickly. So they built a tool that allows governments to set up conversation points with citizens. They can text it in, so it's not a high-tech thing, it's not a Wi-Fi enabled thing, and they use it for points like at bus stops and things like that. So that's one example of people trying to use tools that people actually have in their hands, which is cell phones, even if it's not a smartphone, and engage with them there.
I'm Julie Caruso. I live in the Hamlin Midway. I'm a local artist. And just building on the access point, I mean, it's really just providing stations, technology stations for people to use, that are kind of protected for these specific purposes, just kind of, they can have the tools, the resources are there. We just need to figure out how to distribute them, and even if it's a, public and not, providing private technology to individuals, which isn't a bad idea either. It's probably just more complicated, but,
So you reminded me of another project that we supported, not from my side of the shop, but from Polly's side of the shop in Chicago, which I'm blanking on the name. Steve, you may be familiar with it. I'm blanking on the name of the campaign, but it's basically a campaign to say, between libraries, employment centers, senior centers, schools, we have computers and sort of tech interface spaces.
Smart community program?
Yeah, but this campaign is a specific thing that they're rolling out. But yes, that they're rolling out on buses and on on bus stations and around, where they're trying to make it clear that one, there are access points throughout the city, and two, there's skills training throughout the city. So teaching people the basics of how to use a web browser, how to do email, and things like that. So taking advantage of the resources that already exist, that the city already has, and leveraging those.
And on that note, there's a group called the Technology Literacy Collaborative. Is anyone here involved with that group? But I think it's a technology
Literacy Collaborative.
.org, or type in technology.
TLC-MN.org.
That's right, TLC-MN.org. And they have 400 locations they've identified where there are public access points, perhaps more than that. And it was hackathon 2 weeks ago. They helped them convert their database to make it more accessible online. And so you had a marriage of the civic hackers with the digital inclusion community, trying to create something real so people could have greater access to help point people toward those resources here in the community.
But I mean, so just to be clear, that's a huge, I mean, it's a huge, tough issue. And
Are
none of-
there any initiatives of working with local businesses, restaurants, coffee shops, things like that to provide a space for people to access a public, semi-public space for people to access? Yeah. I mean, that might be a nightmare, but it might be.
I haven't seen that. Yeah. Nothing that's come across my desk, but.
It was the Broadband Access Project that was engaged by the University of Minnesota. The grant just ended, but there were 11 centers created around the Twin Cities that provided connectivity to the internet, and they trained on different topics to small businesses. That grant just ended, but yeah, the centers are still available. So, Asian Press, Denise and Beck, was one of those centers, and they engaged a lot of the small businesses here in the university area.
John, I have a question about new. I'm sorry. So Any Foundation has this sort of interest in new. So can you explain what that kind of means to this group in terms of this challenge? If someone puts an idea in, it could be a great idea, but maybe it's been done 10 times.
So I mean, when we get into a room, and increasingly now it's not a room, it's taking place live on our site to talk about the ideas and which ideas, we're going to win. As we winnow down, we dive further and further into certain ideas. We end up, and I've done this now 4 times, we end up having these conversations about what is innovation, what does innovation mean, and it often comes down to that. I mean, it's less focused on new and more so on what's innovative, what's something that people are going to learn from. Often it's equated with new, but what we're not looking to do is necessarily, what we rarely see is, well, this program has worked here in Oakland, we're going to lift up that program and replicate it in San Diego. That's less for us about innovation necessarily, and it's more about, well, I saw this over here and I saw this, I'm going to put these together and try this in a new way. And it's a nuanced thing. Invariably, we end up spending hours around certain projects debating about, is it innovative enough or is it not? The sort of the stock example that one of my former colleagues always thought about was, if you came to me with an idea for a suitcase, if 30 years ago you came with me for that idea for a suitcase, I'm like, oh, that's nice, that's a thing. And if you came to me with an idea for wheels, that's okay, whatever. But if you put them together, then all of a sudden, wow, that's an idea, that's innovative, we can build upon that, right? We can take that somewhere. Does that get it?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think it's helpful. If you push the arrow back one, you'll see how simple it is to actually, there's only 3 fields that are required. The title, the summary, and then the entry description is like an open space. And I was actually an end-use challenge winner in the first round 5 years ago. They had an idea blogger sort of consolation prize, but it was great, right? So I became a blogger around ideas, and this makes it incredibly accessible to take a risk. Take 2 hours of your time, maybe 2 days of your time, but get it in there, right? Just put it in, and the cream will rise to the top, hopefully, and the stuff that wasn't quite formulated might not, but it wasn't like you spent 3 weeks working on a major grant proposal. It's that simple, and so I'm hoping that the Twin Cities generate some great, fresh ideas.
And related to that, what we've done is, once you hit enter, if we were to go put in an entry right now, we can still edit it and change it and alter it, hopefully based on the conversations that happen on the site over the next 2 weeks. So it's not, it's not your traditional grant application that you write and you form it into a PDF and then you mail it into us. But rather, at least for the next couple of weeks, it's a living idea that we hope becomes refined based on the conversations and based on new information that comes into the fore.
And in year 1, I put in 13 ideas. So, there's no limit.
Why does that not surprise me?
Hi.
Hi, Jason Barnett with the Update.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Question I have is a little tied to the last question of innovation and what is that? And kind of the next level is have you been able to track some of the projects you guys funded and actually shown which ones are actually learning how to sustain themselves or how to grow or actually how to scale and go to different areas? Because I think that's one of the biggest problems. I see a lot of great ideas fly past, get some funding, and then end in a nice website somewhere that no one uses or
Yep.
they use for a while.
We've seen a
and
couple of
forgets
those
to.
too. We funded a couple of those.
Yeah, and I think it's normal, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's one of the nice things, they're funding some innovation, but the trick of actually turning those innovations into something that can self-sustain, I think that's one of the biggest problems about a lot of these great ideas we're having is actually how to turn that.
Yep. So so a couple of things. One, yes, we have reported on that, and it's on our site. If you do Night News Challenge assessment or Night News Challenge review, you'll find we've reported on, I think, 4 of the classes so far and talked about what's worked and what hasn't worked. 1. 2, the projects that we do fund, we don't just write a check and then say, awesome, Jason, good luck, talk to you in a year.
I haven't gotten that far yet.
Right. That's not a bad scenario to have, but we really, because of the questions that you just raised, and because it is so hard, and because there is such a high failure rate, and we embrace that. I mean, just in this disrupted age that we're in, most projects that are going to start are going to fail, but we see certain core characteristics that can help them succeed. And so as we fund somebody and bring them on, even before we fund them, but as we get close to the final stages, we start peppering them with how can we help, and trying to find where the gaps are. Often those gaps are very basic back-end things like accounting. Not every project we fund is a pure startup. We fund existing nonprofits and existing for-profits, but a lot of them need basic help along, how do I hire somebody? How do I do my accounting? What structure do I want to have? Am I going to be a for-profit or a nonprofit? And then as the project begins to come to the fore, we start thinking about the sustainability and where did things go next. And I'm having conversations like that probably 3 to 5 times a week right now with different projects we have as we try to help them get to the next level. We've seen a couple of basic characteristics that indicate that you prime for success. One is that when the project is actually aimed at a defined need or opportunity that has come out of real people, right? I think in our space there's a lot of what people derogatorily refer to as solutions in search for a problem, and we've certainly, I think, have funded some of those. Increasingly, as we do our review process, we're looking for, and we've actually integrated as a question at some points recently in our form, which is, what's the problem you're trying to solve, and how did you identify that? Also, I think what we look at, less at the early stages, but more as we go further on, is who's the team at the table, and the diversity of sets of skills and backgrounds that they have. And, so for instance, if you're coming to me and you're saying, I'm going to build an iPhone mobile app that does X, Y, Z, and you have no experience in building iPhone mobile apps, and there's no one on your team that does, look at that. We're unlikely the odds of us funding that are less than if that team is a robust team that's made up of different folks. So that's a little bit of what we see. Hi.
Thanks, Ann Carroll, E-Democracy Board and St. Paul School Board. One of the challenges that we have here, as well as an opportunity, is that this type of challenge that you put forth is it appeals to upper middle class, white, well-educated, native English-speaking people who already know how to navigate government, already know how to get what they need, and generally are very dependent upon what the government does or doesn't give to them. How do we aggressively engage people for whom this matters so much more, and where the real need is defined, as well as the demand and the judgment of quality?
No, that's a really good question. I'll cheat a little bit. Yeah, I don't have an easy answer. I would say that, if there is an answer to that, you guys here are as close to coming up with that than anybody that I've seen nationally, and because of the work that, I'm familiar with what E-Democracy has been doing over the years, that, you guys have a running start and are more engaged with hitting that. But that is so hard. And it's not just from the e-gov, from the tech side either, right? That's a tough question for throughout government. How do you engage, right, parents in education, in the curriculum, and from the state of things? I think I think there are two opportunities that I'm seeing. One is this, which in varying degrees everybody has, right? And in certain communities that are less likely to be engaged with government activities, they're more likely to have it and more likely to be on it, right? And that particularly overlaps with young people, right? So for instance, the most highly mobile, connected group we've seen are Latino boys and young men between teenagers up to early 20s. That's the most mobilely engaged population in the country. So that's between the youth and these new tools, there are opportunities there that we're seeing. So one thing that we're seeing, not just in this e-government work, but across our news and journalism work, is thinking about a website first may not be the best strategy, particularly if you're trying to hit underrepresented groups. But I don't know, I hope you guys come up with some answers here.
This relates to a couple of these earlier comments. I think some of us, I'm Linda McDonald, I run a youth journalism program called 360 Journalism at the University of St. Thomas. So I feel like I have one little piece of the puzzle. I work with young people. I know how to get them engaged in some of these issues that affect their lives, but in a more traditional journalistic way, reporting and writing and interviewing and so forth. I suspect there are other people in this room who have used interactive tools with students who have other pieces of the puzzle. And when I look at something like this, I think I need that team around the table to really, because I would not, I don't feel like I really have an idea that would be competitive. But how do you, or what's worked in other communities where those teams have come together and said, let's figure this out and build a credible, strong idea that really builds on the strengths of everybody at the table.
So one of the ways we tried to bake this into the contest is, and it's now I'm saying this is something that's already happened, so it's too late. The horses have left the barn on this. But we created what we called an inspiration phase. So a week before the contest opened entries, we encouraged people, and we did it in conjunction with a conference we do of community foundations every year, to come in and say, particularly aimed at people who weren't going to come up with ideas that were, that would be entries, but to share opportunities and frustrations that they had. We did it as an experiment, frankly, and our hope was, and we're still seeing some rewards of it, that some of those inspirations would inspire makers to go in and attack them. The places that I've seen, just through doing conversations like this, is when out of a conversation like this, people get together. So I was in San Diego a couple weeks ago. They had a meeting a week after I was there to sort of, and after they all got together, to then dive deeper and to figure out what they wanted to focus on. I also know, I spoke at a class a couple months ago at University of Michigan where they take the contest and make it part of the coursework so that, generate ideas. One of the things, and Steve can speak to this, that we really tried, we worked with the design firm IDEO to recraft a new platform. And out of a frustration that we didn't have a platform that was engaging, that was attractive, that was aesthetically pleasing. And so one of the things we're really proud of, and we get a sense of it here, is that we've created something like that, which maybe becomes more appealing to students. I don't know.
Can I just say one thing quickly? We have 5 minutes more for Q&A, but John has agreed to stay after 1 o'clock until about 1:30. And so one of the thoughts is if somebody here wants to do a shout out and say, hey, I want to work with somebody else, we bring youth journalism to the table. Why don't you do that in the next 5-10 minutes here, right? And just sort of say, hey, I'd like to do a conversation. So we have this room. We're not going to have to flood out of here. So there's a chance to do some networking in real time among those who might want to partner with somebody.
The other thing is, just to add to that, is that the news challenge is sort of designed to get the most innovative, just sort of way far out there kind of things, but it just is only one way in which Knight is thinking about urban government. So to the extent that there are things that are kind of St. Paul specific solutions, that's something that I could help work on or convene. We have a prototype fund that you want to describe the prototype. This is just sort of one of many ways in which Knight is thinking about this kind of work. And I just wanted so the deadline doesn't end at on March 18th for anything you ever thought of.
Exactly. Though the deadline does serve as a way that if you have an idea now, you throw it in. And the people so I have on my team, there are 3 or 4 sets of eyeballs, and we have these other 8 people, all of whom are looking for potential overlaps with other parts of the foundation too. So one thing that we've been seeing increasingly is we fund more projects through different ways that come in through the News Challenge than we do through the News Challenge. Lots of ideas. This is a big net, and often things don't fit with what we're trying to accomplish, to Polly's point, but then if an idea came in like that, we wouldn't even call Polly, we would send her the link since it's an open idea and anyone can see it, and she can see the reactions that people have had, and that can be a starting place for other conversations.
I'm just going to take that point of the 5 minutes. We do have a project that we would love some collaboration. Is utilizing some of the current technologies that are out there and putting it in a platform that will create an open microphone via visual mobile devices, so people can actually send their video through YouTube and in an open mic, answer questions, and then we can go with cameras to one of the senators so they can explain one of the issues, and kind of like an interaction like that in through video. We're trying to appeal this to the multicultural community, but we would love to open up, to students and other things, So we would love, I would love to sit down and discuss some of the ideas that we have, and maybe we can create some synergy.
I'm Jeremy Akers from Twin Cities Media Alliance and Twin Cities Daily Plan. I have a question, but I want to say our focus is on underreported stories in underserved communities, and we have a new community engagement editor, Lola Mohammed Noor, that some of you may know, who's going to be focusing on these same issues. So I would love to talk to both Linda and you afterwards. But I just have a question, which is that can you give me some idea of what kinds of videos and photos and also additional files, what kind of videos, photos, and additional files are useful or helpful for this?
I think, so it can be daunting. You have so much white space and you want to throw up a lot. And I think one of the things that invariably, despite all the underlying I'm doing about the value of getting ideas in early so conversation can happen, the vast majority of the ideas are going to come in the last 24 hours, even the last 12 hours of the contest. And I say that because the readers, which is me and a handful of other people, are going to have a lot to sift through in a relatively short period amount of time. So I would think about, yes, you should take advantage if you have a link or a video or even a slide deck that sharing would prove a particular point that you're trying to demonstrate. I think, keeping in mind, there's a really good post that my colleague Chris Sofer, who's read every application for the last 2 years, put up on our website last week that you can find. He gives some really fundamental tips of the types of things you should try to hit for, identifying for need, talking about your team. But often what happens is when we sit back in the room and try to go through these ideas, there's a lack of specificity. To the extent that you can use some of the capabilities of a video or a graphic to specifically show what it is either you're trying to solve for or that you're trying to take advantage of or that you would do, that's really helpful. So often people, it could be a sketch on a cocktail napkin of what it would look like, and you upload that. It could be an actual prototype of what it might be. It could be anything on that scale, but having something that people can actually see when we get into our room and we have to start winnowing down to the final 50 is something that's really useful. I think less helpful is, someone that puts up links to 18 of their YouTube videos in the last 10 years, which I don't think anyone's done that yet, but often people will, you can get overwhelmed with the amount of things that you can share. Hi.
Mike Minimo with SPNN. I am curious if you can speak a little bit to your definition of news and journalism.
Yes, I can try to. We try to keep, just as I'm trying to keep open government broad, we try to keep a very broad definition of news. One of the things we found is some of the more projects that we were excited to, several of the projects we funded in the last few years have told me on the day that we awarded them the grant, we put them up on stage and gave them their plaque, they said, oh, thank God I applied, I almost didn't apply because I'm not newsy enough. I think last year, the number of the 20 winners we had, the number of projects that had actually worked in a newsroom was definitely the minority, and maybe 4 or 5. And they were major news, people from the Washington Post and New York Times. So, all that is a preface to say, I think of news as, and I think we do, is information that's relevant to how you live your life. Often that means within a specific geography, but increasingly I think the digital world allows us to live our lives in different types of sections. So, one of the winners we had last year is a project called recovers.org, which is about helping communities prepare for and recover from natural disasters when they happen, right? So, not news in a necessarily kind of a traditional or a recent traditional sense, but when Hurricane Sandy hit, the services and tools that they provided sure were relevant for people living in Red Hook and in Brooklyn and how they lived their lives. Does that make sense?
So two more arms, right? So you guys,
First.
I'm Jack Gray. I work for the city of St. Paul, and I've been gnawing on a government 2.0 kind of issue for a while now, all by myself. But it's not something, I don't think of it as being something that is kind of rather obscure, but it may not have a news connection. But it impacts the way $8 billion of public funding will be spent.
I want to hear it. I don't care how much time we have left. Now, that kind of a pitch, you got to say what the idea is.
I don't know. It's around compliance and inclusion of businesses owned by people of color, and the 32% employment goal for people of color on publicly constructed projects, and the stadium that we're going to build is a $1 billion project. But that's just a fraction of what in the next 5 years will be subject to inclusion and compliance. But the mechanisms for how we do that are 19th century, and we need to reinvent it in an outward-facing way that co-creates compliance with stakeholders. But we need about, maybe 5 Code for America fellows. We need, a series of yearly night winners. It's a big project.
Well, I'd love to talk to you about it. I mean, I can't promise you any of those things, but those are, you hit on 3 or 4 different notes of themes that I'm hearing elsewhere that are things that we're thinking about if not doing anything about, but definitely you're hitting on common problems. So I'd love to talk to you more about it.
John, I'm transitioning with e-democracy as well. My question is, you are all over the place, all over the country, talking to people, and some of the projects that you may have funded in the past are transferable, like things like maybe text vision you mentioned. How are you kind of cataloging that information and then sharing them with communities so that we could possibly use those things that you funded and you tested? And I'm especially interested in projects that have been tested and evaluated and have been shown to go deep into community and apply to people more than the people you would assume that would use them already.
So there are 3 ways in varying degrees of intentionality and work time that we're doing that. One is increasingly we realize, as any of you who write a grant report know, that actually a friend of mine on Twitter over the weekend said, I'm spending my Sunday writing grant reports that I know no one's going to read, right? Increasingly what we're doing is trying to take those grant reports and turn them into blog posts for our site. So if you go to Nightblog, I think we actually have nightblog.org, but if you just do Knight Foundation blog, increasingly what we're doing is giving the microphone to our projects. And maybe it's not from a grant report approach, but it's teasing out lessons and problems they're wrestling with and having them share them in a blog or a video format. So there's some lessons there. Second, more formal, is we robustly, as Steve knows, assess and evaluate our grants as they're made and try to share those as much as we can. We haven't done that with this sort of frame. I think what we're trying to do, and Polly alluded to it, is with this topic, connect the different parts of the foundation more and think much more. It's not an accident that I'm here, because I got on the phone with Polly and her colleagues to say what we're doing, and Polly said, well, come up to St. Paul. So I think over the next year, you'll see us be much more intentional about trying to take the networks that we've built up, the code bases that we've built up, and some of the projects, and trying to connect them more into our communities. Does that make sense? But I think we're trying to put with the blog and with the Night FDN Twitter account, we're trying to put a spotlight on stories on a day-to-day basis as they come up.
Good. Thank you. I know there'll be more questions, and he's very available right after this.
And if you can't connect with me today, I'm my number is 773-451-8169. I'm JSB on Twitter, and my email address is bracken@knightfoundation.org. So for the next 2 weeks, all I'm doing is taking questions about this. So.
And if you don't mind a high volume of Twitter, go ahead and follow him. I just say.
Oh!
Just FYI, if you go back, if you look at the name tags, those who put in Twitter accounts actually put that at the bottom of your name tag. And so a little bit of network encouragement just among those that are here too. So we have, in 5 minutes, we're going to hear from 4 projects, and it's going to be amazing. Right? Okay, so Bill Bushy, our technology developer for e-democracy, is a co-founder of OpenTwinCities.org. He's ill today, so he couldn't be here to give you his 1 minute. Alan, where are you? So Alan, everyone look at Alan. Alan is the other co-founder. He works at MintPost. He was also a Code for America fellow 2 years ago now, first year. All right. So we're really, it's great that we have Alan in our community, and with him and Bill and a bunch of folks, over 50, 60 people have connected on the Google group. So go to OpenTwinCities.org, join the Google group, join Meetup. It's also, we're connecting it to City Camp, Minnesota. City Camp was an unconference. It's happened in probably 40 or 50 around the world. We had one, it'll be 2 years this fall, but it's time for another City Camp. We had about 150 folks that RSVP'd 2 years ago and about 100 folks that showed up. We're going to do that again. And so Bill Bushy, watch for Bill. He's our new in-house tech guy doing all kinds of cool stuff with us. And that was the hackathon that happened 10 days ago. These are the folks working with the TLC, Digital Inclusion Database. Elise works for the city of Minneapolis, just with FYI, and she works with the state education department in the library section. And they use duct tape for their Wi-Fi, right? All right, and they were doing crime data back in the corner here. They were doing catalogs of public data sources there, just trying to get things onto a spreadsheet. So the St. Paul Public Library, Kit, you want to give us 1 minute on what's going on with these 2 projects?
Well, obviously we do a lot that's really about the foundational infrastructure for digitally inclusive St. Paul. So thanks to Night, our mobile workplace project, we provide basic, very basic digital literacy training in Spanish, Smalley-Mon, Ormo, and Margarin in community settings throughout the city, and we've just taken that in-house in terms of our own budget. It's a priority for us. North Star Digital Literacy Project is a community collaboration around, we have created very basic free online assessments about competencies, basic digital literacy competencies in 6 modules, and about 55 organizations around the metro area now offer these, and if you really want a certificate and can prove you get a certain number right, it can help you in your job search.
When the first 20 years when I was involved in this space, it was really much a build it, they will come mentality, right? We'll get together, we'll put some code together, and people will show up because it's so important. The information is so important. And in general, that just doesn't work at all, right? And so one of the things that, thank you to the Knight Foundation, but also just to, I have like 4 volunteers in the room here that help run Jocelyn with where's Jocelyn? Somewhere here. That is Jocelyn. She's the floor manager on the west side, Art in Como Park. We have Donna Evans, who's part of our outreach team, and also volunteering in Summit U, Rondo area for running a neighbors forum. And so what happened about a year and a bit ago is we launched sort of the nation's largest campaign to create a network of neighbors connecting online, area by area across St. Paul, in the most inclusive way possible. So nationally, the stats say that for those who connect on neighborhood email lists and groups, if you make over $75K a year in your household income, 15% of those households, internet-using households, are on these kind of neighborhood networks. If you go to 50,000 or less, it drops to 3%. That's a huge gap based on income. And we know, for those of you who are part of these networks, that this can really unleash a lot of connectivity. It's a mix of who can recommend a good plumber or finding that cat, but also lots of civic exchanges, lots of discussions about your park buildings and your police programs and crime prevention. It's that mix. And this is our team this summer. Last summer, we had 10 people on a team. They spoke 6 different languages. We added 4,000 new members across 16 neighborhood forums that we covered. St. Anthony Park has their own Yahoo group, so we didn't duplicate their effort. Key thing is that of the 3,000 that we recruited in person at community events, for those who fill out the survey, half are people of color. We have a map where we show you how we targeted. And John mentioned, we're kind of out on the curve on this in terms of trying to be far more inclusive. We really are pretty lonely in this space. I mean, a lot of the civic tech work tends to be who shows up. And here you have Sharmake, our Somali Outreach League, with a Hmong baseball team that volunteered to translate at the door. Bain was their coach and would go door to door with Donna, right?
Yeah.
And help translate, and connecting with people. And so my goal, at least for St. Paul, and then in Minneapolis, where we also actually we have 9,000 members in Minneapolis, where we haven't had the inclusion resources though, right? So it's much less inclusive, is to be able to allow all people in neighborhoods to connect in meaningful ways. So that's a little update on us. And Forever St. Paul, come on up and give us your quick minute.
Hi everyone, I'm Heidi. I'm here from the Forever St. Paul Challenge. I know we have a number of community outreach partners here in the room, so I want to say thank you. As you can see up there, the Forever St. Paul Challenge is a challenge about what would keep St. Paul great. This came out of a night study, The Soul of the Community, where they really looked at what makes cities great. And so we've kind of taken that and run, and we have a $1 million challenge where we're asking folks, what would you do with $1 million to make St. Paul a better place to be in the future? So we're collecting ideas from now until April 3rd. We have some special events happening throughout St. Paul, so I would encourage you guys to check those out. We have a postcard on the table in the back there. The next one is actually Wednesday at the Highland Park Library. So again, I encourage you to check out our website, which is mnidea.org. Come to a special event in a neighborhood near you to submit your idea. And then again, I want to say thank you to Kit and Linda, Steve, others I missed in the room who are our partners. So thank you so much. We look forward to hearing from you.
Well, and one of the fun things is that the tool that's being used, the Minnesota Idea Open, actually was created as a result of the St. Paul Foundation, Minnesota Community Foundation's participation in an early challenge that we had to community foundations, encouraging them to think of local news and information as important as schools and kids and safety and all the other things that community foundations support. And so it's actually as a result of that collaboration like 5 years ago that they already have this great platform that actually Bush Foundation also helps support to now apply it. The challenges until this time have been more like $15,000
Yeah,
$1 million.
$1 million really gets a lot of people interested, but we're really hoping to have community-based conversations at these kind of idea open houses at the events we're having, but it's a lot of overarching themes, especially on inclusion and really getting into the niche and the neighborhoods and getting out that voice that you might not be able to. So working with Linda and the youth in the St. Paul Public Libraries and the St. Paul Public Schools, and also we have a number of people on our team who are from diverse communities who can actually go back in and help us,
And the voting is at the state fair, so what's more democratic than that?
Thank you so much.
Thank you, all of you, for coming. As we said, John's going to be here for a while. Steve has wonderfully, through Eventbrite, captured all of your emails, and you can find us, I think, fairly easily. So thank you to Steve and his crew, and to my assistant, Delta, who helped make sure we had good food. So thank you, Delta, for your hard work on that. And there's more food. Yes, you actually could stay. We have the room for a bit, so if you actually want seconds.
And for those of you who came at the last minute, if you could make sure you leave information, Enoch. Enoch's our social media coordinator for e-democracy. So if that way we'll have you on the list, and we'll email folks with places where you can land, so to speak, to continue the conversation.
Is this video going to be available anymore?
I'll put it up. Yeah, that's the plan. Although it looks like it stopped recording at the end here, but yes.
Thanks, everybody.
So I would like to get your cards. Sir, let me grab my card for a second.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to give you my card. Hopefully we can connect with having an event there. Sorry. Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, Alan. Okay.
And what we want to do is help people realize their potential.
Okay.
So I'd be really interested in hearing more about your idea.
Okay. Well, it has to do with what's called compliance. There's most construction projects that have public money involved in them have different kind of compliance goals. There are goals for inclusion, for minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, small businesses. They also have goals for minority and women work hours on the job for employees, and there's a complicated set of certifications that businesses get to enable them to meet these goals. And the state has some, the feds have some, local jurisdictions have some, and it's all rather complicated and obscure, but it adds up to trying to steer about 10% of these contracts towards, so $8 billion, that's $800 million of opportunities for small businesses and minority-owned businesses. So it really is substantial. But the mechanics of it are really poorly done. And I think it's an area where principles of open data and transparency can transform the way we do it and make us do it much more effectively, much more responsively to the community, and also help the community kind of step up and be part of that monitoring of the compliance, because kind of crowdsourcing more eyes on these projects, because some of them, I mean, there's some activist groups that try to hold the cities and the different entities accountable, but their attention is scattered, and we just had a project. The powerful thing about this, some of these rules and regulations apply even if there's, like to a whole project, even if there's only a small amount of funding, public funding in it. So there's a project at the Smith Brewery. It's a $100 million project, $65 million of construction budget. There's only $1.5 million of public funds, but these goals apply to the whole $65 million. You know, so it didn't draw the attention of any of these groups that.
Oh, I'm not leaving yet. I'm just going to be talking to someone over here.
We do compliance on it, and we kind of do our best, but it'd be a lot stronger if.
You ain't went outside front and looked at those 7 parking meters they got in front of those houses.
University should do. Get out of here.
Yeah, I'm just terrible. I mean, I look at my own kids a lot of days. I think,
do what they want with the data, not what we want.
Thank you.
Lobbyists. Well, we probably crossed that blade around for 5 years.
I grew up in this neighborhood right on Carroll.
So that's kind of where, what I'm thinking about. I'm going to try to get
we probably just seen each other around.
for some Coast of America fellows for next year's round. I don't know if it'll work, but where'd you go? Where'd you Seattle? What'd you work on?
Yeah, well, she's one of these people, I used to run the Bracken newspaper.
Okay.
So we built a sort of website that helped with that. But the city didn't really invest past the
Right.
we launched the same thing in Philly, and they invested in their
well, this is an area, I mean, this compliance area is kind of reporting.
Well, one of the things that we're doing is getting community reporting, and we're training.
But it's
so that
kind of a broken enough system.
Well, I'm on there.
No, I'm one of the, I barely frequent the facilities unless it's
that don't have a clue about all this stuff.
Well, I'm sure I'll see you
stuff.
again.
So, and I really think it's right.
Yeah, for real.
Because I can read, I get all the emails.
Yeah, no,
For every one of the groups, so my phone is busy.
I think there's some fears about the open data. Though most of this data is public data. It should be. So I think they'll get past that. The other thing is that you've got there's some complexities.
We're telling folks not to
Different jurisdictions. So you've got multiple jurisdictions that have different requirements. But there is a lot of pressure to try to simplify that because it's burdensome to have to do one thing in St. Paul, another thing in Minneapolis, another thing when you're working for the Met Council, and another thing for the Department of Transportation. So even if they maintain separate systems, figuring out how to make them interoperable, so there may be a different compliance angle from one city to another, but at least the form could be the same, so you know how to enter your data the same way for the state as you do for the city, as you do for the county, as you do for the Met Council or the Airport Commission or whoever's doing the building, you know. So, hi, nice to meet you.
I've been around. I know
What is Uber? Oh, so is it a regular cab or is it getting you?
they're all like black.
Okay. Huh. Okay. To get. So have any of the ones that are like the hitchhiking apps or whatever? I know that some of the inner cities work, but has anybody locally figured out a way to kind of? I mean, there'd be kind of a trust thing. I mean, it's like.
Whenever I can be helped,
I know some of them for commuting, there are places where people hang out that are going to be part of these systems. People like kind of self-organizing too, though, you know. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I wonder how much they have like downtime waiting for fares compared to some of these cabs you see they wait 3 hours at the airport in a long line to get one fare from the airport.
Uber's only been here since December.
Okay.
So I came from Hennepin and Franklin, just south of downtown. All right. I'll call you. It's $37. I'll take the bus.
That's a Metro pass for a month, you know. I wonder what a cab would be. 20, 25 maybe? 25? Well, you know, cabs are relatively cheap, and they can be cheap if they're available enough to where you really can have one fewer car in the family. But then all of a sudden, wait, we saved $10,000 and I'm dropping 25 here or there. Well, that makes sense, right?
And that's actually why they finally came out and tried this, because we switched on to one car and I cost 7 cents.
Oh, that's great.
And you get from where I was going to here, an hour plus.
Yeah, that's when it makes sense, you know, if it's, and same with, the network of transit. If it's good enough that people can really afford to get rid of a car, all of a sudden it makes a completely different
For community, it works great.
Right, this is another organization in town.
As soon as it starts warming up, it
Engagement too,
this,
full staff.
I'll start biking.
It's also another, it's a different sort of behavior.
I'm bike to work just about 7 months out of the year. So if I can do it 8, it's the best part of my day. I love biking to work and biking home. It's like wakes you up, and it's you're outside, you're getting exercise, but it doesn't feel like you're getting exercise. It doesn't feel like you're,
What this one is doing, this E-Day, is it's more like find a project, give it to the boss.
All right, good to see you.
Take it forward.
I got
The founder of the organization.
I saw a bunch of tweets about it. I heard of it.
Talking about
So you guys are doing everything in group right now, right?
That's great.
I'll be looking forward to hearing from you. Yes, thank you.
Auditing capabilities.
Yeah, well, you know, we really get it. So people have asked that question.
That would be great.
Well, we have.
Yes, it is. So I was actually in that conversation. PRI when I came. Did the accident records thing for a little while. Really?
Because I'm on a few of the forums. I don't know what
Down there. That's a kid. It's in his hands now. Yeah, nobody's done it as far as I've seen. So yeah. So it's a small software development company called Software Good. We do mostly Ruby on Rails stuff. We do a little bit of WordPress, a little bit of mobile stuff.
We're really serious about this project.
Basically, we're the software engineering version of the agency. We don't do all the fancy upfront design.
No,
graphics and whole architecture. You can do a little bit of that.
I specialize in
but mostly
we do a lot of ideas and projects.
We do all sorts of projects. Ideally, we like to work for nonprofits, ones that have it's like a social good mission, an environmentally good kind of mission. Those are our the ones that we like to work for. Those are what we try to get. We do actually a whole bunch in healthcare history right now. Like we do a diabetes program for healthcare.
So like that's one real sort of like practical use I've heard, you know.
I'm not going to do it right now.
I've
only been there for
Application developers, we have a couple projects that we have done, but I haven't checked out.
Yeah. They've been around.
We do all kinds of applications, you know, applications to
10 years.
mobile platform
They was originally
all kinds of stuff. We're
Free
pretty savvy.
Consulting was the name of the company. It was rebranded in 2007, I think, to Software Good.
And that's what we want to do is instead of creating a new tool that people have to download and everything else, we want to use it with whatever applications they have. So either they're, with whatever provider, they can just create video. They can post it in YouTube. That is the easiest way possible. And from there, you create a link to the application, post a Facebook, and then they get certain, they get something back if they post it in there. Once it's posted in there, everybody can view it, and everybody can comment, and they can just follow the same trend, make a comment on it, read a comment. Just great. So I'll have a conversation.
The Open Twin Cities group? No. That was the URL up there, right? Yeah, I wrote that one down. I'll look it up here when I get back. I know I've been to the database like once now. I'm pretty sure I'll make it to this next one. So I know I've sent a whole bunch of other people. Yeah, glad you check this out. Yeah. Yeah. We've got some space, but I don't know if it's any better than Foster. Yeah.
Hey Jack, I would love to see your business card.
Let's take the ones you don't want, give it to the ones you don't have. Teach them how to refurbish it, take it apart, rebuild it, send them on their way.
Okay. Yeah.
And then have that template.
Could you send me, perfect.
So you'll kind of perfect the manual, write the manual.
And I would love to hear about your project. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, the how-to videos, the instruction manuals, they have not been developed well enough. That's what I would like to see. To get it perfected and tested in a group until it can be duplicated by anybody and have a higher success of working.
That's great to meet you. Awesome.
No, I haven't. When I did our local website, I just copied pasted from their website. So I know what they've got on their website. I didn't realize till a year later that I copy pasted their address and their hours. I didn't read what I was copying. And nobody caught it, so I guess it shows you how much readership we've got.
Giving the public more access to it. No, I hear you. So if you figure out that as an application?
Yeah, I saw somebody offering
seriously.
coding services. I was talking about developing this learning environment.
Here, so if you come up with a, give me a chef.
Somehow could be a template that people could jump into. But the one thing I'd like, let's say it grew too big. Let's say it's like these international online courses where you get 21,000 people joining. I want to somehow be able to have them fill out a form, interest, passion, and then automatically use them according to the so have a machine group of forms. And then say, okay, you're a
Like that, but they do try to kind of have students that can talk to each other.
Yep. That's a strategy, but I haven't got the skills for coding that. Probably there's something that's really formative. I joined a move about a month ago.
So this is something you created for the city of San Francisco.
On the 6th day, I submitted my homework, and they had 41,000 students and one teacher. And she was trying to get them into groups, and she used a Google spreadsheet. It said break yourself into groups of 20. And the spreadsheet had a maximum of 50 people allowed at the time. It crashed. 41,000 students saying this is a big clusterfuck. And they canceled the course. They gave up. And the course title was How to Design an Online Course. Because Virginia Tech, I mean, it's the first move that crashed. So they didn't know how to do it. Yeah, I've taken 3 of them now just in the last 2 months.
That's amazing. Like skills workshops, like how useful it all is and all that stuff. And it's great that it's trying,
Yeah. Well, what I've been amazed at is that there's open educational resources that you can just take and use. You know, they've been perfected and tested, and they're just take them and go with it. So if you create this little website, you just put all that stuff in there, and just have a Creative Commons license, and you give it away.
I haven't checked yet. So that we're in the right place for this idea. Okay. And should I go into detail describing our qualifications at this point, or is that come later?
All caps.
Great. Well, thanks very much. Well, thanks very much. It's nice meeting And which one? Oh, that's right. Yeah. Patricia? Yeah. So we're a nonprofit group that has public interest in local governments and mapping and communications. And so I focus on interactive mapping applications. Here's one that I built for the city of San Francisco that helps people to find parks and recreation opportunities throughout the city. You just click on the map, boom, you get a list of all the events, places, and classes going on within a half-mile radius. You can search it by time, you can search it by activity. And so I want to build something like that as a template that cities nationwide or even worldwide can use to get out their information about parks and recreation activities. Yeah. So what do you do? Exactly. Well, you know, the thing I'm talking to folks about, and I was going to try to get integrated into the e-democracy forums, is this neighborhood collaborative app where people can post things like, oh, today we're going to go play games at Ginkgo Coffee House, come join us, or we're having a community meeting to talk about the new Buffalo Bills proposed development in Snelling, and just all the things that people want to mention. And then, you know, like cadenza musical, we're having an Irish Open Jam tonight, anybody can bring their instruments and come in, just all those things that make it great gathering spaces and things to do. And those can be very easy events.
every building.
And why not? Because otherwise you have all these disparate pieces of information. People get their events from the Villager, from the library website, from the Parks and Rec website, from too many places to look. And you get news letters in the mail, and you're trying to remember all these things, and you write it down in your calendar, and you kind of forget about it, forget to look at your calendar. So what if you had this one-stop app? Point. Yeah, where your fingernails go, see everything, you know? Yeah, because I mean, Google Maps, there's too many things on there that doesn't have that. So you might consider incorporating that into your thing. Yeah, and here's a little flyer too. Well, no, there's 12 of us, except I'm the only one locally in St. Paul. We're a little bit scattered. The main office is in San Francisco. I moved from there 5 years ago. We've also got one in Oregon, one in Washington, one in Vermont.
So you work everywhere.
Mary Park. Okay. But close to him.
Well, nice to meet you.
All right. Yeah, sounds good.
So you would include mayors and ideally, yeah, that would be too, like, who's responsible, who do I talk to? Who's my block leader, who's my city
We're not in the zone of being like, we're doing this. So, if that were to put it that Oh my goodness. My boss is Have the friend in order the other day? I could say it was great. People actually had to put their hands dirty and do that. And that was like perfect. No. So Chris Barr joined our team about a year ago.
I thought I got them all.
While you move back, okay, here.
So that everything that changes right before came in the old. Steve, I'm sorry, we missed February, we don't know how, but now we do. So it's bad.
See ya, I shall.
Yeah. Now, do you know about voice
Because
Are you keeping track?
oh yeah, I'm keeping track.
Yeah.
It's just with the less hours, it was like, you know, and plus all the other stuff. So I'm wondering if I submit it today,
Because you're due and I want to get you paid, yes, but it's an exception, okay?
Okay.
So next
Normally,
time, what